Hello, I'm Christopher Hope, the Telegraph's chief political correspondent, also known as Chopper to my friends and to you people here at the Telegraph at the Tory Party conference. This is Chopper's Politics, live from the Conservative Party conference. Now, my guest today, until recently, was the Culture Secretary, but following the PM's reshuffle, he's now the party co-chairman, and he used his time on the main stage to deliver a rousing rebuke of the woke to the party faithful. Labour, he said, has woke running through it like a stick of Brighton rock. I'm talking, of course, about Oliver Dowden, a minister who's already used his new brief to allude to a possible early election, but more on that later. Oliver Dowden, the Conservative Party co-chairman and MP for Hertsmere, welcome to Chopper's Politics.
Thank you.
Good to have you here.
I'm delighted to be here.
How is your conference going?
I think it's going brilliantly. I hope everyone here is enjoying themselves. You know, the thing that's really struck me about this is how we're able to do this, how we're able to sit cheek by jowl alongside each other. You wouldn't be doing this in many countries around the world. In fact, I can't think of another country would enjoy quite this level of freedom. And that's because of the vaccine programme. And I think this is, in action, we're seeing the success of the government. And I think that's created a wonderful atmosphere, and also combined with the fact this is the first time we've been able to celebrate that wonderful result back in 2019 when Boris delivered the landslide.
Do you worry this might be a massive super spreader event for COVID?
No, because I trust people. I believe in people, and I believe that Conservatives are sensible, moderate people who understand that you do the right thing and you get your vax. Yeah. And I would imagine the vast majority of people, I won't ask people to put up their hands, but I imagine every single person here has had their vaccine. So I trust the people.
Now, I bring a question from Angela down in Brighton. Are you scum?
Well, I think that kind of tells you something more about the Labour Party than it does about the Conservatives. And actually, and I talked about this a bit in my speech, it has been completely the opposite experience for me in all my time working for the Conservative Party. The people that are most committed to their communities, the people that are serving the teas to the pensioners, the people that are running the dementia cafes, the people that are fundraising for mental health, it's Conservatives out there in their communities serving them. And the difference between us and Labour is that we are tolerant. And actually, there's this survey that bore it out. And I see this every day. And I've seen it from people I've engaged with. We're relaxed about people voting or people supporting Labour. We know they're profoundly wrong. We don't have to throw insults at them. No. We know our values trump their values. I think it's a sign of their lack of belief in themselves that they have to resort to this kind of name-calling.
Would you call Labour scum?
No, I call Labour deeply misguided individuals who will bankrupt our country if they ever get back in power again.
Now, all these people here read the Telegraph's letters pages every single day. Now, Lord Lexton is the party historian.
Yes.
He remembered how Nye Bevan called the Tories lower than vermin on July the 4th, 1948, when the NHS was inaugurated. And that created something called a Tory vermin club. Now, a young Margaret Thatcher went around wearing vermin badges, little badges. And by 1950, 120,000 people had joined the Vermin Club. So, Mr. Chairman, how about a scum club?
Well, I believe the scum, and I was told, reliably informed, the scum club has already been set up. I think some young Conservatives are going around wearing one. There we are. I think Tahina has been wearing one already, and I shall...
Yes. It's your Tory scum badge, which you can wear for...
Well, I will wear it for at least the duration of this
Exactly.
This
And perhaps you should wear your scum badge for the rest of the conference, or else you'll be letting down Dehen and other people who started off. But I think this could be the beginning of a scum club. There's a nervous laughter. OK. Why are you party chairman?
Well, I'm party chairman for two reasons. The Prime Minister has tasked me with two things. First of all, he's told me that he wants a proper party chairman who is a strong voice for the Conservative Party, a strong voice for our values and our beliefs, around the cabinet table, across government, in the media, out there fighting for and defending our values. Now, the way he put it to me, and I hope this is all between us.
Oh, yes, no one else listening.
He said, I want you to be my Cecil Parkinson, but without the shagging. And I say that as someone who has tremendous affection for Cecil Parkinson. He was my predecessor, but one, as Member of Parliament for Hertsmere. And
is Mrs. Dowden OK with this instruction? I've met her.
She likes the second half of the instruction very much.
And when the PM did promote you, did he say, prepare for government?
Yeah, sorry, you ended up... So the second point I was going to make...
just that.
The other thing he said is, we've got to get the election machine ready.
Yes.
And I always remember what Linton Crosby said to me before the 2005 election campaign, and don't worry, I'm not going to replicate his accent. He said, you've got to fatten the pig. You can't fatten the pig on market day. And when he said you can't fatten the pig on market day, what he meant was, elections aren't won and lost on the election day. They're not won and lost when the election is called or even that year. They're won and lost now, and we have to do two things on that front. One, we've got to deliver for the people that put faith in us, and that's why you've got the slogan of this conference as getting on with the job. And number two, we've got to get the machine ready now, the key people in place, ready to fight that election campaign. So in my mind, the fattening of the hog starts right now. My job is to start feeding and fattening up the hog so that whenever the Prime Minister wants to call an election, we'll be ready for it.
Assuming the hog isn't slaughtered because of shortages of people in abattoirs, as we see at the moment with pigs, when do you think the party will be election ready?
Well, my job is to make sure it's ready whenever the Prime Minister calls it. But I want to be clear, and again, I'll let you into a slight secret here. The Prime Minister didn't summon me into a corner of the Cabinet room and say, it's going to be 2023 or all these reports. He is very, very much focused, and he's constantly reminding us around the Cabinet table that we've got to just get on with the business of government. And I think the last thing that people want to hear from us, and the last thing that we're doing, is focusing on election strategies and all that kind of thing. That's my job as party chairman. That's not where the government focuses. The government focuses on delivery. But
you're ready for a May 23 election or May 24. Those are the two bookends of that period to have the next election, aren't they?
The bookend is whenever the fixed-term Parliament, whenever the I think it's 24 sometime. I have to remind myself exactly the end date.
Are you happy with the branding of the party?
Yes.
Are you happy with the branding of the party? Do you want to bring in... I mean, I know that the oak tree was there once back in the day when you joined, I think, in the mid-noughties, or the torch and the rest. I mean, is the party branded the right way? Any changes there?
Yeah, I joined the party quite a way before the oak tree rebranding, but my focus is not on symbols and oak trees or torches or whatever else. My focus is on making sure we deliver on our core values as Conservatives, and I think people will decide whether to support us or not based on an oak tree. They'll decide whether to support us or not, and whether we're true to our values. Living within our means, creating job opportunities for people, creating prosperity, protecting our public services, delivering great schools. That is the thing that wins or loses elections.
Yeah. When's the party moving to Leeds?
Well, we've got the office, and it's looking very nice. We've now got to fill it with people. Yep. So that process is going to begin later this year. Probably from November, people will start working in the Leeds office, and then we will have a formal sort of opening with everyone in place early in the new year.
Will you move there?
Well, I will spend some of my time there, but lots of politics happens in Westminster, basically. So as party chairman and the research function, the press function are going to have to be predominantly in our London Matthew Parker offices. So we're keeping Matthew Parker Street, and we're having a joint HQ with Leeds.
And how many might be working there by, say, end of next year?
I think we're looking at a roughly 50-50 split.
And that's numbers-wise? That's
a bit over 100 in
Leeds.
Each one. Okay.
Yeah. What are the current membership figures for the party?
Well, we announced the figures last year of 200,000, and it is in pretty much the same ballpark as that. It hasn't shifted enormously.
It's going up or down? Trending down?
It's up and down. So. Whenever we have election campaign, whenever we particularly have leadership elections, lots of people join because they want to participate in that. With COVID, because we haven't had so much activity on the ground, all the events that we're used to, there's fewer opportunities both to bring people in and get people to renew. So it slips back a bit, but it's kind of netted off around that number. There's not been a significant net shift.
Can I ask you about Ben Elliot, your co-chairman? You're used to running your own show. Do you mind having a co-chairman?
Ben is a fantastic man and one of the great fundraisers of the Conservative Party. He was the person that powered that election victory in 2019. He's broadened our base of supporters and brings a great deal of expertise. And I'm already enjoying working with him. I've known him plenty of time before I started in this job, and we're getting along great.
Normally that person is a treasurer, not a co-chairman, but you're content with the sharing of responsibility.
Yes. I've been appointed to my role by the Prime Minister. I'm getting on with my role.
And all these claims about his links and his listing charity donations, return of access to Prince Charles.
But look,
you're relaxed about this?
I have seen this every single time. The media, and this is no disrespect to any of you, it's part of your job, but you asked lots of questions about Andrew Feldman when he was chairman of the Conservative Party. You've asked lots of questions about pretty much any person who's been involved in fundraising for the Conservative Party or indeed the Labour Party. And that's entirely legitimate and part of our open democratic process, and it's right we should be scrutinised. But I don't believe that Ben Elliot has done anything wrong. He's properly separated his interests and so on. I think it's all of a piece of what we've seen many times before.
And these donors clubs you have where you pay $50,000 a year to meet with the PM every so often in a year, you're happy with that, are you? The way it to those looking in looks a bit like privileged access for money, doesn't it?
Well, I understand someone bid to have a game of tennis with the Prime Minister. I think I'd rather them than me, given my tennis prowess. So, I think it's always been the case that there have been conversations between members and the leadership, donors and the leadership, councillors, leadership. They're all part of the Conservative family. But there is an alternative. If people don't want to do this, ultimately, there is an alternative that exists in lots of other countries, which is we say, well, we're not comfortable with people giving private donations to the party. Let's move to a state-based model. And I think that would be profoundly the wrong...
The Lib Dems are doing that, aren't they?
Yeah, but I think, well, maybe for some self-interest reasons, given their fundraising.
Yes.
But for me, it's... first of all, I actually want to pay tribute to our donors. I think... most people give money to political parties as part of their civic duty and a civic sense of responsibility, and they care about their country, and they do it from exactly the right place. And by the way, they put up with an awful lot of scrutiny and questions in doing so. And I would far rather have that free and open system, which I see as part of our liberties as a country, that we don't have the state interfering in the funding of political parties. And I think it would be a massive retrograde step for the state to intervene. And more than that, I also think it would ossify politics, because you would not be able to have new incumbents, because you just get you'd always have your amount of state funding determined by how many seats you'd already got. And I think that the US and the UK have very dynamic political systems. We're able to adjust to changing times rapidly, and I think that is part of our liberty.
Yeah. You mentioned Cecil Parkinson, and he had quite a humble background, and you do too, don't you? With your mum worked in Boots, didn't she, in St Albans, and in terms of you might expect, I mean, you hung around with the Cameron set for quite a while, but actually you weren't of that set, were you?
Yes, well, I need to be a bit careful, because my mother had started telling me off about this. She says, why do you keep banging on about your humble background? She said.
Is it not true?
And I should say that I had a very... a great ordinary upbringing. It is true, my mum worked until very recently in the local Boots, literally just on the edge of my constituency, and my dad worked in the wire factory just down the road. In fact, it's not actually just my parents, my grandparents as well. There's always a great debate in our family between the two grandparents. So I talked in my speech about Red Harry and his wife, my grandmother. I'm afraid to say, Conference, she was not the biggest fan of Margaret Thatcher. And whenever Margaret Thatcher came on the television, she was straight on turning it off. My other grandmother, Summer sort of grew up with bedtime stories from my grandparents. I had it drilled into me from a very early age about how this country was going to the dogs until this marvellous person, Margaret Thatcher, came along and restored our pride in our nation, our belief in our nation, restored market values, a free economy, our freedom and our strength as a nation. And you can guess which one of the grandmothers I sided with.
Just back to your move recently, what do you miss most about the Ministry of Fun?
Well, it wasn't. This is the cliche of it. I'm afraid to say it wasn't that much fun during the COVID crisis. No, everything was shut down. And actually, DCMS is much more than the old Ministry of Fun. It has responsibility for some very high growth areas, particularly the digital and tech sector. But it was a huge privilege having responsibility for the kind of, in a way, the soul of our nation, the things that we enjoy so much, whether it's the football or the tennis or the rugby union, rugby league, whether it's our West End theatre, whether it's the playhouses up and down the country. And for me, if I achieve nothing else in my time in government and in politics, being able to have that biggest single ever bailout of culture in our history, I'm tremendously proud of that. And by the way, let nobody ever say to you, the Conservative Party are not the party of arts and culture. No party has given more support to arts and culture than this Conservative government.
No thanks to it from the culture sector, but never mind.
I think in the long run, they might.
You don't miss your rows with Andrew Lloyd Webber. You nearly put him in jail, didn't you?
No, I had a very pleasant exchange with Andrew Lloyd Webber. I think we're due to have dinner in a couple of weeks' time, so it's we had. I actually think I very much respect Andrew, and it was his job to make the case for the West End, and I respected him in doing so.
How about the BBC? Was Nick Robinson right to tell the PM to stop talking this morning on the Today programme?
I think, maybe I should choose my words a bit carefully on this, given I'm sat next to a journalist, but it's right that politicians are scrutinised and held to account. I think sometimes politicians do have the right to finish a sentence when they're answering a question.
And that wasn't the case this morning.
I'm saying as a general point, I can understand the Prime Minister's frustration not being able to finish a sentence.
OK, on to policy. How do you think you'll beat Labour the next election?
Well, I think the number one thing we can do to beat Labour is actually to deliver for the people that voted for us. But I also think it goes more fundamentally than that. And there's a question about whose side you are on in politics and in life. And I do worry that the Labour Party has found itself out of sync with where the nation is. And if you look at all those people that came across to us at the last election, it wasn't just because of the delivery they wanted from us. It was also because they felt that we were more in touch with their values and their concerns. And that's why I use that line about woke running through the Labour Party like a stick of Brighton rock. I think they are, the Labour Party used to be run by the cream of the working class. You talked about Nye Bevans. I think it has rather been hijacked by a very sort of middle-class sort of academic outlook that prioritises virtue signalling on some of these cultural issues rather than actually understanding, where the nation's heart is.
That's not Labour, that's also National Trust, that's all sorts of other bodies, isn't it?
Well, I was constantly having that fight as Culture Secretary, and the point I always made to them was, why are they being funded? Why is it that all of you, in some way, have money taken off you by the state, compulsorily, through taxation, in order to fund these organisations? You accept that. And I certainly accept it because I think we should be preserving our heritage and our history. I think it's something that is enormously valuable to us. I take joy in seeing the statue of Clive of India between the Foreign Office and the Treasury. I take pride in seeing Churchill in Parliament Square. I take pride in going to the British Museum and seeing the wonderful collection of great objects from around the world. And I think most people, if you ask why you're taking money off a granny in a council flat in Newcastle to pay for that, it's to preserve our history and culture. And I worry that some of these organisations are responding too much to this noisy and aggressive brigade of activists who are saying, well, hang on, there's too much of this sort of taking pride in all this. We need to be, creating divisions, picking up stones, looking for conflict, and see, rather than the narrative arc of our history, in which I take tremendous pride. We all grew up, depending on your age. I grew up on Thatcher and Churchill, Thatcher and Reagan, or Roosevelt and Churchill. We have values that we take pride in: freedom, democracy, rule of law, liberty. There's a whole sort of other set of arguments, which is that's deeply misguided. Actually, that's just a front for privilege and aggression and patriarchy and so on and so forth. And I don't think that's where most people are. And I think organisations need robust leadership to stand up to that aggressive campaigning, because ultimately they need to be careful. If they go too woke, they risk going broke. And I think that they just need to tread that line very carefully.
It's also a government funding issue. You can withdraw funds if you see too much.
Well, they have to demonstrate why they justify the funding in the first place.
Can you level up in time, do you think? Because you've lost this 18 months, haven't you, during the pre-COVID crisis. Can you get the money out there into these red wall seats to support them, live their standards, see what levelling up what really means?
Well, I would say we are actually levelling up already. I'll just take one thing that I had responsibility for as in my previous job. When Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, I think it was about 9% of the country had this really, really fast gigabit broadband. And the gigabit broadband is like building the motorway to your house instead of having a country lane. And that enables you, you could stream 100 Netflixes at once if you wanted to, which is fine. But what it really means is that you can do anything you like remotely. We've gone from 9% to 60%. And that, in turn, is enabling large parts of the country to participate fully in the modern digital economy. So work is already happening. And if you by 2028, which will be after the election, I can give you that assurance. You'll be able to get from London to Birmingham on a high-speed rail link. We're already investing massively in our motorways. So a lot of work is happening, but there is clearly more to do.
Okay. And just in other areas, has your party lost its way on tax, do you think?
That my heart as a Conservative, and I know from many conversations with the Prime Minister and with the Chancellor, their heart as well, is that we should be a low-tax party. And actually, if you look at the overall record since we came to power in 2010, when we came to power, the personal tax threshold, I believe, was about £7,500, £8,000. Now it's £12,000. What that means is that millions of people have been taken out of tax altogether, and millions of low-earning working people have had their tax bill cut enormously. That's where our heart is, doing that kind of thing. Of course, I can go through the arguments and reprise them as to why we had to make the national insurance change, but I very much see that as something we had to do in that particular circumstance, not a change of direction.
Will you break any other manifesto commitments apart from national insurance?
I sincerely hope not.
And your plans for planning, you mentioned that in your speech, didn't you?
Yeah.
You're listening to the members who might have some issues on planning. Will you be listening to them?
Of course, yes. And I know that Michael Gove, our excellent new Minister, Secretary of State responsible for that, will make sure that we listen and do that. I've always thought it's possible to build houses that people can love and appreciate and raise a family in without succumbing to urban blight and urban sprawl. And I'm acutely conscious of that in my constituency, which neighbours London. The last thing on earth I would want is the London sprawl, much as I like London, start encroaching on the green fields that create that precious breathing space between London and Hertfordshire and keeps our towns and villages distinct.
Do you think also that the labour market can correct itself in time so you don't get reversed on you to add to the next election? Can you get enough these jobs filled from the UK workforce?
Well, yes, broadly yes, and I think it's the right thing to do because people voted for change. They really did vote for change in the Brexit referendum. And part of that change was about immigration, and part of that change was making sure we genuinely controlled our own migration, which meant that we didn't have a limitless supply of very low-cost labour, particularly from Eastern Europe. Now, if you're going to stop that, you have to accept that the corollary of that, the consequence of that, is that you're going to have rising wages in some low-skill areas. Now, if we get to the point where there's not enough people in the existing labour market in the short term to fulfil that need, then we will take action. That's why George Eustice announced seasonal agricultural workers scheme for poultry processors, and we've done it with fruit and veg as well. But those should be seen as temporary measures to get us to that end point, and that's why we need to invest in the skills and the education and everything else to achieve that.
Will we see a big increase in minimum wage tomorrow? PM speech?
Well, I'm not going to reveal any of the contents of the Prime Minister's speech, but we have already massively increased we introduced the national living wage and we massively increased it. And that is a much more conservative proposition, the proposition that I buy into, which is that the single best route out of poverty is to get a job and to get a well-paid job. And that's what we are doing with our reforms. We've got record vacancies. Unemployment is massively lower than was predicted, thanks to the sort of interventions the Chancellor's made. And we are seeing wages rising, both in the way that we were discussing earlier and through increases in the living wage. Far better, the national living wage, far better to do it that way than to be taxing people and recycling that same money through the tax system back to those same people in handouts.
In a tweet, how would you define levelling up?
Creating opportunities for everyone.
Here's an idea for Michael Crick. There are 9 royal boroughs in England. There's none further north than Sutton Coldfield. Why not create a royal borough in the north of England for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee next year?
I think that sounds an excellent idea, and that's one of the things I'm enormously looking forward to, and something that one of my big regrets of not being as DCMS Secretary of State was working with the Palace to help deliver this wonderful Platinum Jubilee celebration. We give thanks to Her Majesty the Queen for 70 years of service to the nation. But then we've also got the Birmingham Commonwealth Games. We've got the fantastic festival of the UK. I've always thought that if 2020 was the terrible year of COVID, 2021, thank goodness we're all starting to recover, 2022 should be a year of fantastic celebration for our nation.
I did ask Twitter before we came on, what shall I ask you? And most of them asked, where can I find some petrol? But I shan't, I think there's not much...
There's lots of petrol in Manchester now, which there wasn't a week ago.
That's good. A couple of quick questions here. Mike Wilson said, are you prepared to lose millions of Tory votes if you plough ahead with COVID passports and unaffordable green policies?
Well, first of all, we haven't ploughed ahead with COVID passports. I don't want us to have COVID passports, but ultimately, and I'm hopeful that we'll never get to this situation, but if the choice is between COVID passports or shutting down, again, our theatres, cinemas, galleries, everything else, then I think that's the least worst option.
And green policies, loading up household bills to pay for this big push towards net zero?
Well, I think ultimately, if we design green policies in the right way, they can be beneficial for people. You know, if you insulate your house properly, then over time you face lower energy bills and you end up better off from doing so.
Got some quick questions before we go to the audience here. Are you a moderniser or a Shire Tory?
Well, I must say at heart I'm a Shire Tory. Yes. But I do believe in making sure the Conservative Party remains relevant to people. I mean, Margaret Thatcher made the Conservative Party relevant by rewriting the post-war consensus. David Cameron made the Conservative Party more relevant by appealing to groups of people who'd never voted Conservative before. Boris Johnson made the Conservative Party more relevant to people by embracing Brexit and making sure we actually delivered on it when Parliament was locked. So I don't believe in preserving an aspic. I believe in change, but appropriate change.
Park run or half marathon?
But if park run's shorter, park run.